Well, Trump 2.0 is coming into focus. One might say he has deftly named his choices for top cabinet positions. They have one thing in common. They are all, in fact, Trump loyalists, which isn't surprising. They are joining his team. In the last week, Trump named Susie Wiles as White House Chief of Staff. Stephen Miller will be her number 2. And on Monday, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik was named United Nations Ambassador. Former Texas Congressman and Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe will spearhead the CIA.
And then on Tuesday, the South Dakota governor who shot her dog, Kristi Noem, was tapped for Secretary of Homeland Security.
Trump also announced Fox News' Pete Hegseth to be the next Secretary of Defense. Hegseth is a veteran with battleground experience in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Progressive media, not surprisingly, mocked Trump's picks. Here's Joy Reid on her show, The Readout. Let's watch.
The former and future president is moving quickly to fill the clown car and round out his cabinet before he changes his mind and fires them all. Moments ago, Trump announced that he has selected Fox weekend morning show host, you can't make this up, Pete Hegseth, to serve as Secretary of Defense, because why not?
Late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel also made fun of the picks. Here's a bit of his opening monologue of it. It's so funny.
Trump, and we just got this news like a minute ago, hired Pete Hegseth. You know who this is? He's a guy on the Fox and Friends Weekend Edition to be Secretary of Defense. Hulk Hogan must be devastated.
So we're getting into some real meaty choices. Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. He is a veteran. We know all about what he thinks because he's been the morning show host of Fox for a long time.
Sure.
I think I've been on television with him a few times. He has made his foreign policy views very known. I would say that he is also someone who tends toward a hawkishness or a pro-military engagement. He was a big supporter of the Iraq War. I don't know if he's changed his views subsequently, but Trump likes a fighter and probably thought he does a good job on TV. Has been interviewed by him on Fox and Friends multiple times, and so that's kind of how his choices work, I think.
So let me do something unexpected by speaking up briefly on behalf of Pete Hegseth, and
Great.
then I'll say why he's wrong about everything. All the coverage, naturally enough, is focusing on his TV work, and it's Fox and Friends, and that is an obvious and easy source of disparagement. He does, apparently, have a master's in public policy from Harvard, which has been mentioned almost nowhere that I have seen, and suggests that there is a functioning thinker there behind whatever theatrics that we might show from Fox News, where he once threw an axe and hurt somebody from West Point, I believe.
You're saying he's more than a pretty face.
He's more than a pretty axe-throwing face. Now, where I have much more of a problem with him is not in terms of his background, but in terms of what he actually argues. And to make a long story short, one of his sort of cause celebs was campaigning to pardon or to otherwise improve the situation of 3 people who had been or were still members of the US military who had been accused of all kinds of abuses. The most notable being a man by the name of Edward Gallagher, who was a Navy SEAL and was charged with murdering a prisoner. He was subsequently acquitted in rather hazy circumstances. A prosecution witness who had been granted immunity changed his testimony at the last moment. But in any event, there was an investigation done as part of that case that showed lots of people who had served under Mr. Gallagher accusing him of various abuses. And the fact that Hegseth lines up with someone like that is, I think, dangerous in terms of his overall worldview. And just if I could briefly, Robby, in that case, the Navy prosecutor in the case talking about Gallagher said that he had basically provided ISIS with propaganda manna from heaven because his own behavior was so brutal that it had fueled the case made by America's enemies. And so to have someone aligned with or an advocate for that person as probably the Secretary of Defense, I think, is troubling.
I don't know very much about. I vaguely remember the situation and his advocacy there, but I'm sure I agree with you that those kinds of actions or activities should not be defended and are things that our enemies use to galvanize terrorism against us. Something he is taking a lot of flack for, where I think it's a little bit unfair. I've seen some commentary about this morning about what he said about women serving in the military, where he said that they should not be in combat roles, and that's being described as some kind of anti-woman thing. But he said they can serve in the military, they just shouldn't serve in combat role, because, and this is where the reality of biological difference does come in, the vast, overwhelming majority of women cannot satisfy the physical standards requirements for some of these positions. The standards I'm for, if you can, fine, but the like Black Widow superhero-esque person that exists in Marvel Comics mostly does not exist in real life, and the standards should not be lowered to make some kind of sex-based distribution more fair or equitable.
Is that Hegseth's argument? Though I'm honestly not entirely sure.
I believe
know the
that is his argument.
and I wasn't sure whether his argument was that because of literal physical strength that was the reason for it, or if he was implying that it introduced a kind of messiness in terms of heterosexual relationships among the troops.
Oh no, I think he was saying it was because of physical. I could be wrong. That's my view. Is just because it should not be. We should not be reducing our standards in order to have more, gender parity.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about Kristi Noem for Department of Homeland Security. I would rather just abolish this department entirely. You and I probably disagree on which aspects of the federal government should be abolished, but maybe on this one, you're going to be a little bit with me because you as a more progressive inclined person probably share a lot of my criticisms
skepticism of it for sure.
Domestic surveillance and civil liberties violations, the Patriot Act, the weaponization of the government against innocent America. It's all been a total disaster. What I like about Kristi Noem is that her COVID governance was a little bit more skeptical, even by Republican standards, of mandates and violating people's civil liberties. So I hope she brings that same spirit to the role. But again, the role should not exist. It should just be, the department should be closed down.
This is such an interesting one because the points in which we agree and disagree are very intermingled here. I would be glad if she brings that greater skepticism of government to the Department of Homeland Security. I was less thrilled when she did it for COVID, which I thought was reckless. I would favour more of a nanny state when it comes to COVID, Robby.
Well, that's all right. We like you anyway, Niall. All right.
Survive.
Lots more to talk about today on Rising. Ken Klippenstein will be with us to discuss the Marco Rubio dossier that nobody else in the media thought you should be allowed to see. Stay tuned.